Alarms blared as the human fleet broke radio silence. They emerged from the wormhole, pulsing blue engines blaring, emerging into a barrage of alien missiles. Captain Brian Ward barked orders to defend the fleeing alien refugees, those who once mocked Earth. The Iridians, an advanced race filled with pride and arrogance, now crumbled under the attack of a mysterious aggressor. Their distress calls reached Earth, echoing through the halls of power, igniting debates and divisions. The Iridians, who once looked down upon humanity's technological inferiority, now begged for help, their voices laced with desperation. Earth's leadership, torn between past grievances and the opportunity to forge a new alliance, ordered Captain Brian Ward to lead a small fleet through an experimental wormhole. His mission, to assess the situation and provide aid if necessary. But as he emerged from the wormhole, he found himself in the midst of a war-torn battlefield. The Iridian defense fleet lay in ruins, their once mighty ships reduced to floating debris. The homeworld, a marvel of advanced technology, burned under the relentless bombardment of the unknown armada. Brian's fleet, outgunned and outnumbered, fought valiantly to protect the fleeing Iridian civilians, their ships darting through the chaos, shields straining under the onslaught. As the battle raged, Brian received a chilling transmission from the Iridian High Command. The aggressor was none other than the Hydrus, a species the Iridians had enslaved and subjugated centuries ago, led by Supreme Commander Zorthal, a ruthless strategist fueled by vengeance. The Hydrus sought to make the Iridians suffer as they had. Brian knew that his fleet alone could not turn the tide of battle. They were being pushed back, their numbers dwindling with each passing minute. In a desperate gamble, he ordered his ships to lure the Hydrus armada away from the planet and towards the unstable wormhole. If they could buy enough time, perhaps the Iridians could evacuate their world and Earth could prepare for the coming war. As the battle neared the wormhole's event horizon, Brian secretly contacted Earth, revealing the true scale of the threat. He requested reinforcements, knowing that any help would arrive too late to save his fleet or the Iridians. With a heavy heart, Brian prepared to make a final stand against the Hydrus onslaught, his crew ready to lay down their lives to protect those who once mocked them. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as the wormhole pulsed with energy, the battle raging around it. Brian gripped the armrests of his command chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen. He knew that the next few hours would determine not only the fate of the Iridians, but also the future of humanity, and he was ready to face that future, no matter the cost. As the desperate battle raged on, with Brian's fleet struggling to hold back the relentless Hydrus onslaught, a sudden flash of light erupted behind the enemy armada. A massive wormhole tore open, and from its swirling depths emerged a vast human fleet, led by none other than the legendary Admiral Elena Solaris, aboard her flagship, the Nemesis. "Reinforcements have arrived," the comm officer shouted, his voice filled with renewed hope. Brian felt a surge of relief wash over him as he recognized the distinctive silhouette of the Nemesis. He knew that Admiral Solaris, his mentor and a brilliant tactician, had come prepared for this very scenario. The Exodus fleet, a secret project Earth had been working on for years, was finally revealed in all its might. Admiral Solaris wasted no time in taking charge of the battle. Her voice crackled over the comm. "Captain Ward, this is Admiral Solaris. We'll coordinate our efforts to divide the Hydrus forces and exploit their weaknesses. The Exodus fleet has some surprises in store for them." As the reinforcements joined the fray, Brian witnessed the deployment of advanced weaponry and tactics never before seen by the Iridians or the Hydrus. Swarms of AI-controlled drones buzzed through the battlefield, targeting enemy weak points with surgical precision. Gravitational distortion fields generated by specialized ships disrupted the Hydrus formation, causing their ships to collide and veer off course. Dark matter torpedoes, a closely guarded human invention, punched through the enemy shields, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. The tide of the battle began to turn, with the combined human fleets pushing the Hydrus back and inflicting heavy casualties. The Iridian refugees cheered as they witnessed the display of human might and ingenuity. However, Supreme Commander Zorthal proved to be a formidable opponent. He quickly adapted to the new human tactics and technology, redirecting his forces to counter the Exodus fleet's moves. In a daring maneuver, Zorthal led a strike force to board the Nemesis, intending to capture Admiral Solaris and force the humans to surrender. Brian, seeing the danger, immediately ordered his ship to intercept the Hydra strike force. "All hands, prepare for close-quarters combat. We can't let them take the Nemesis." As the two ships collided, Hydra's warriors poured into the corridors of the Nemesis, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat with the human crew. Brian fought his way through the chaos, determined to reach the bridge and protect Admiral Solaris. On the bridge, Brian confronted Zorthal, their weapons clashing in a fierce duel. As they fought, Brian tried to reason with the Hydra's leader. "Zorthal, listen to me. The Iridians have changed. They're willing to make amends for their past actions. This war will only bring more suffering." But Zorthal, consumed by his thirst for revenge, refused to listen. He pressed his attack, his strength and skill nearly overpowering Brian. Just as all seemed lost, Admiral Solaris intervened, placing herself between Brian and Zorthal. In a desperate struggle, Admiral Solaris fought valiantly, buying time for the Nemesis security forces to retake the bridge, but Zorthal, in a brutal display of combat prowess, struck a fatal blow, mortally wounding the Admiral. As she lay dying in Brian's arms, Admiral Solaris whispered, "Don't let my sacrifice be in vain, Brian. End this war and bring peace to the galaxy." With renewed resolve, Brian rallied the Nemesis crew and successfully captured Zorthal. Even as the battle raged on around them, the loss of Admiral Solaris weighed heavily on Brian's heart, but he knew that her sacrifice had given them a chance to end the conflict once and for all. With Zorthal in custody and the Hydra's armada in chaos, Brian stepped up to lead humanity's forces. He needed to make Admiral Solaris's death worth something. An Iridian officer rushed over, his face grim. "Captain Ward, our spies found something. The Hydra's built a weapon hidden in the Corax asteroid field. It's a massive cannon, powerful enough to destroy planets. We think Zorthal attacked the Nemesis as a trick to distract us while they ready the cannon to fire." "Damn it! We have to take it out now or they'll kill billions." Brian activated the ship's PA. "This is the captain. I need our top pilots and Marines for a critical mission. Briefing in 5. Minutes later, Brian stood before his bravest soldiers detailing the mission. His best friend, Jake Iceman Novak, gave a nod as he volunteered. They geared up and launched, racing for the asteroids. The rocky field was a maze of jagged stone and frozen gases. Hydra's fighters swarmed out to intercept them. "Iceman, on your 6. Brian rolled and fired, barely dodging an asteroid. Iceman juked left, the Hydra's guns ripping into his wing. Flames erupted from the gash. "Shit, I'm hit. Reactor's critical," Iceman yelled. "Punch out!" The canopy blew and Iceman rocketed into space as his ship exploded. Brian watched his friend drift away, Hydra's ships closing in. His mind and heart warred. Every instinct said to save Jake, but if he didn't stop the cannon, everyone would die. "I'm sorry, Jake, I'll come back for you. I swear," Brian choked out. He gunned the engines and broke away, leaving his friend behind. The strike team punched through and landed on the cannon. Hydra's soldiers poured from hatches. Bullets filled the air as both sides clashed. Brian led the charge, fighting toward the control room. They burst in to see the cannon powering up, crosshairs on the Iridian homeworld. "It's firing!" They sprinted for the reactor, cutting down Hydra's guards. The reactor pulsed with energy. "We gotta destabilize the core! Shoot the relays!" Plasma fire lit up the chamber. Explosions rocked the room as the reactor cracked. "Fall back, it's gonna blow." The team scrambled for the ships as the asteroid shook itself apart. The cannon exploded just as they cleared the blast radius. The shock waves slammed their ships' frying systems. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Alpha Team, cannon destroyed, but we're dead in the water. Repeat, we are adrift. Over." Silence filled the bridge, the crew staring at the comms in disbelief. Adrift, shields down, life support failing. Hope faded like the emergency lights. A proximity alert blared. "Captain, unknown vessel approaching." Scanners swept the sleek black ship, angular and alien. It pulled alongside the battered human fleet. The comms crackled. "This is Prince Azrael of the Shadowfire. Prepare for emergency docking and evacuation." The voice was commanding yet calm. Brian narrowed his eyes but nodded. Airlocks hissed as the crews shuffled aboard the Iridian ship. Medics tended to the wounded in the gleaming halls. Brian and his officers were escorted to the bridge, a symphony of holographic displays and contoured control panels. Prince Azrael stood at the center, his presence magnetic. His black uniform bore the Iridian royal crest. "Captain Ward, I know you have questions." Brian stepped forward, fists clenched. "Why are you helping us? What's your angle?" Azrael's eyes held a piercing intensity. "I seek the truth, Captain. The truth about the Hydrus uprising and the sins of my people." He motioned to the star map, zooming in on a distant planet. "There lies our salvation, an ancient colony world, home to the Celestial Codex." Brian's brow furrowed. "The what?" "An Iridian artifact of immense power. It holds the key to uniting our races, to ending this war." Azrael's voice grew urgent. "But it's guarded by the Sentinel, an AI as old as the Codex itself." The prince turned to face Brian fully. "I need your help, Captain. Together we can retrieve the Codex and bring peace." Brian weighed the offer, the weight of the war bearing down. "All right, we'll help you, not like we have a choice." Azrael nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Set course for the colony world and pray we reach it before the Hydrus do." The Shadowfire surged forward, the battered human fleet falling into escort formation. Light years away in the twisted wreckage of the asteroid field, the Hydrus regrouped. Admiral Carla stood on the bridge of her dreadnought, seething at their losses. "Zorthal has failed us. The humans still live." Her claws dug into the command console. "No more. I will lead us to victory, to a new Hydrus empire." The crew cheered, thirsty for blood. Carla grinned, all teeth and malice. "We will crush them once and for all. Set course to pursue. Leave none alive." The Hydrus fleet powered up, weapons hot, engines burning. The hunt was on. Starlines stretched and snapped as the Shadowfire dropped out of warp at the edge of the lost colony's system. Azrael peered at the screens, searching. "They're the third planet, that's where." Alarms blared, cutting him off. The sensors flared with contacts. "Hydrus ships incoming!" the tactical officer yelled. Brian rushed to the console, eyes wide. A massive Hydrus fleet, dreadnoughts and cruisers, dropped out of warp around them. They'd been waiting, a trap. Carla's face appeared on screen, her smile cruel. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Her eyes gleamed. "Fight, and we will rend you atom by atom." Azrael glared back. "We will never surrender to you." "So be it. All ships open fire, burn them from the stars," Kalar snarled. The void lit up as the fleets clashed. Torpedoes and plasma beams crisscrossed the darkness. The Shadowfire shuddered under the onslaught, alarms screaming. Brian gripped the console, knuckles white. "We have to punch through their line, keep pushing for the planet." The human ships threw themselves at the Hydrus, cannons blazing, drawing fire away from the Shadowfire. Hull plates buckled, venting atmosphere and bodies. As the battle raged, a message played across Brian's personal terminal. A security recording from Carla's brig. Iceman, strapped to an interrogation table, bloody and defiant. "Hey, Bree, guess I got myself captured. These ugly bastards can't break me, though. I know you'll get the job done. Save the day, yeah? Just... ah!" Electricity arced over Iceman as Hydrus guards prodded him with stun batons. The recording cut out. Brian slammed a fist on the console, torn. He had to get the Codex, had to stop this war, but Iceman... He turned to Azrael, jaw tight. "I need a squad of your best. We're going to get my friend back." Azrael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Go, we'll hold them off. Get to the planet." Brian grabbed a rifle, checking the charge. He looked to his volunteers. "Gear up, we're boarding the Hydrus flagship. Let's bring our boy home." The Void Reaper loomed before them, a monstrous titan of black metal and pulsing energy. Brian's infiltration team, clad in stolen Hydrus armor, slipped through the ship's defenses undetected. Their footsteps echoed in the dark corridors, the only sound the hum of the engines. "Stay sharp," Brian whispered over the comms. "We find Iceman and get out, no heroics." The team moved with practiced precision, clearing room after room. Hydrus crewmen fell before their assault, bodies littering the floor. Brian led the charge, his rifle spitting plasma, his eyes hard and determined. They breached the brig level, alarms blaring. Hydrus guards poured into the halls, energy blades humming. Brian's team met them head-on, a clash of weapons and wills. Plasma scorched the walls, the air thick with the stench of ozone and blood. "Push forward," Brian roared, dropping a guard with a shot to the head. His team surged ahead, cutting a path to the cells. They found Iceman strapped to a strange device, tubes and wires snaking from his skull. His eyes were open but unseeing, his mind lost in whatever nightmare the Hydrus had trapped him in. "Jake!" Brian ripped the restraints away, cradling his friend. "Jake, come on, wake up!" Iceman stirred, his eyes focusing. "Bree, that you?" His voice was weak, slurred. "I'm here, buddy. We're getting you out." Brian hauled him up, slinging an arm over his shoulders. As they turned to leave, Iceman grabbed Brian's arm. "Wait, there's something you need to know." He took a shuddering breath. "The Hydrus, they've been experimenting on us, trying to create some kind of psychic super soldiers." Brian's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "I saw it, Bree, in my head. They've already succeeded. A small group led by Zorthal, he escaped, been working with their scientists." Iceman's eyes were haunted, pleading. "You have to stop them." Brian nodded grimly. "I will, I promise." He keyed his comm. "We have Iceman, exfil now." They fought their way back to the hangar, Iceman leaning heavily on Brian. As they neared their ship, a squad of Hydrus elites blocked their path. Towering warriors clad in crimson armor, they radiated a palpable aura of menace. "Leaving so soon?" The leader's voice was a sibilant hiss. "And just when we were starting to have fun." Brian's team opened fire, but the elites moved with blinding speed, dodging the plasma bolts. They closed the distance in seconds, their blades slicing through armor like paper. Brian watched in horror as his team fell one by one. He fired until his rifle clicked empty, then drew his own blade, the blue-white plasma sizzling to life. The elite leader laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You think you can stand against us, human? We are the future, the next evolution of the Hydrus." Brian charged, his blade clashing against the elites. They dueled across the hangar, sparks flying, the air humming with the clash of plasma. Brian fought with all his skill, all his strength, but the elite was faster, stronger. A slash to the leg sent Brian to his knees, his blade skittering away. The elite raised his sword for the killing blow. Hand fell, a smoking hole in his chest. Iceman stood behind him, Brian's rifle in his hands. "I got you, Bree." He helped Brian to his feet, the two friends leaning on each other. They limped to their ship, the last survivors of the infiltration team. As they blasted away from the Void Reaper, Brian's mind raced. Zorthal and his psychic warriors were still out there, a threat greater than any they had faced before. On the bridge of the Shadowfire, alarms blared as the ship shuddered under the onslaught of the Sentinel's weapons. The ancient AI warship moved with impossible grace, its hull shimmering with an eerie, iridescent light. "Shields at 20%, the tactical officer shouted over the chaos. "We can't take much more of this." Azrael gripped the command chair, his eyes locked on the view screen. The lost colony world hung before them, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. "Divert all power to the forward shields," he ordered, his voice calm and steady. "Prepare to engage the phase shift drive." The crew looked at him in shock. The phase shift drive was an experimental technology, untested in battle. To use it now against an enemy like the Sentinel. "Do it," Azrael said, his tone brooking no argument. "It's our only chance." The Shadowfire surged forward, its hull shimmering as the phase shift drive engaged. For a moment the ship seemed to flicker, to become translucent. Then, with a flash of blinding light, it vanished, reappearing behind the sentinel. "Fire all weapons," Azrael roared. The shadow fire unleashed a barrage of quantum torpedoes and graviton beams, the weapons tearing through the sentinel's shields. The AI ship reeled, its hull buckling under the onslaught. Azrael's eyes narrowed. Target its power core, overload its systems. The shadow fire's weapons focused on a single point, a pulsing, glowing orb at the heart of the sentinel. The AI ship shuddered, its lights flickering. Then, with a blinding flash, its power core detonated, the explosion ripping the ship apart from within. The shadow fire rocked in the shockwave, its shields flaring. Consoles exploded, crewmen thrown to the deck. Azrael clung to his chair, his knuckles white. As the chaos subsided, the crew looked to the viewscreen. The sentinel was gone, reduced to a cloud of expanding debris. Beyond it, the lost colony world beckoned, its surface a tapestry of verdant green and shimmering blue. "Take us in," Azrael said, his voice heavy with the weight of what was to come. "It's time to finish this." The shadow fire descended through the atmosphere, its hull glowing with the heat of re-entry. As it touched down on the planet's surface, Azrael and his team disembarked, their weapons at the ready. The ruins of the ancient Iridian city stretched before them, a maze of crumbling stone and twisted metal. Holographic guardians flickered to life as they approached, spectral figures clad in the armor of a bygone age. "Halt!" the lead guardian intoned, its voice a ghostly whisper. "Only the worthy may pass, only those who can answer the riddles of the ancients." Azrael stepped forward, his eyes flashing with determination. "Ask your riddles, Guardian. We will answer them." The Guardians posed their challenges, each a cryptic puzzle steeped in Iridian lore. Azrael and his team worked together, their minds racing as they sought to unravel the secrets of the past. With each riddle solved, another Guardian faded away, until only the final one remained. It beckoned them forward, toward a towering stone archway. "The vault lies beyond," it said, its voice fading. "But beware, for the greatest challenge is yet to come." Azrael nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. He led his team through the archway into a vast chamber lit by pulsing, ethereal light. At its center, hovering in mid-air, was the celestial codex, a crystalline sphere that seemed to contain the very essence of the universe. As they approached, a figure stepped from the shadows. Zortal, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly power, his psychic warriors at his side. "You're too late, Prince Azrael," he said, his voice echoing in their minds. "The Codex is mine. With its power, I will reshape the galaxy in my image." Azrael raised his weapon, his team fanning out beside him. "Not if we stop you, Zortal. Your reign of terror ends here." Zortal laughed, a sound that chilled the soul. "You cannot stop me, Iridian. None of you can." With a wave of his hand, he sent a pulse of psychic energy slamming into Azrael's team. They flew backward, their bodies crashing against the stone walls. Azrael struggled to his feet, his head ringing. He looked up to see Zorthal and his warriors advancing, their eyes blazing with the power of the Codex. The final battle had begun, a desperate struggle for the fate of the galaxy. Azrael and his team fought with all their strength, all their courage, but Zorthal's power seemed insurmountable. One by one, Azrael's warriors fell until only he remained, battered and bloodied, his weapon lost. Zorthal loomed over him, a triumphant sneer on his face. "And so it ends, Prince Azrael," he said, his hand outstretched. "The Iridian legacy dies with you." Azrael looked up at him, a small defiant smile on his face. "No, Zorthal. The Iridian legacy lives on, in the hearts of all those who fight for what is right." With a final, desperate surge of strength, Azrael lunged forward, his hand closing around the celestial codex. There was a blinding flash of light, a searing rush of energy. And the chamber fell silent, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. A burst of static crackled across the ghost's comms. Brian shot up in his seat. Captain Ward, this is Prince Azrael. Zorthal is here. His powers are immense. He's turning my own men against me. Blaster fire and screams echoed behind Azrael's voice before the transmission cut out. "Punch it, we have to get down there now," Brian shouted. The Ghost's engines roared as it plunged into the planet's atmosphere, the hull glowing red. Brian and his team grabbed their weapons, checking ammo and charge packs. The ship landed with a jolt, ramp slamming down. Chaos greeted them outside. Iridian soldiers fought each other in vicious hand-to-hand combat, their eyes glazed, movements jerky like puppets on strings. Zorthal stood at the center of the maelstrom, arms outstretched, face split in a manic grin. Tendrils of psionic energy swirled around him, lashing out to ensnare more minds. Brian and his team charged into the fray, their suits shimmering with psi-dampening fields. They waded through the mind-controlled Iridians, neutralizing them with stun rounds and shock batons. Azrael and a small group of soldiers huddled behind a crumbled wall, barely holding against the onslaught. Brian fought his way to the prince's side. "About time you showed up," Azrael quipped, firing his plasma rifle. "Can't let you have all the fun." Brian lobbed a psi grenade, the pulse scattering a cluster of controlled Iridians. Together they pushed towards the ancient vault, Zorthal's laughter echoing behind them. The Hydrus warlord and his elite psychic warriors gave chase, hurling bolts of psionic force. At the vault's entrance, a shimmering energy field held the celestial codex suspended. Azrael placed his hand against the field, ancient runes flaring to life. "Cover me. This will take a moment." Brian and his team formed a perimeter, pouring fire at the advancing Hydrus. Zorthal's warriors leapt and twirled through the air, deflecting shots with shimmering psi shields. One slammed into Brian, energy blade slicing at his throat. He caught the blade on his armored gauntlet, servos whining. He smashed his rifle butt into the warrior's face, bone crunching. Beside him, Iceman stumbled, blood leaking from his nose. His eyes flared silver as he drew on his own growing psychic might. He thrust out a hand, a lance of psionic power, spearing a Hydrus warrior. The vault rumbled, cracks splitting the stone. Azrael grunted, the codex slowly descending into his hands. Zorthal roared, charging at the prince. Brian leapt to intercept him. They crashed together, grappling, psionic energy crackling across their armor. "Azrael, the codex!" Brian shouted. Azrael scrolled through the gleaming hieroglyphs, eyes widening. "Zorthal, listen to me. The codex, it shows the truth. Iridians, Hydrus, we were one people, torn apart by cataclysm and lies." Zorthal snarled, slamming a knee into Brian's stomach. "Lies? You Iridians enslaved us, slaughtered us." "Her tragedy born of misunderstanding. The codex is the key to reuniting our races, to healing our shared wounds." Zorthal hurled Brian away, whirling on Azrael, psionic energy gathering around his fists. "To me, the codex is the instrument of your destruction. I will rewrite history in Hydrus blood." He leapt at Azrael. The prince met him head-on, the codex blazing with light between them. The vault shook, chunks of stone raining down. Brian struggled to his feet, Iceman helping him up. "We have to get out of here," Iceman yelled. Brian shook his head. "Not without Azrael and the codex." They charged back into the fight, the rest of the team close behind. Zorthal and Azrael dueled in a storm of psionic light and flying rubble. The vault gave a final groan and began to collapse, ancient columns toppling. Brian and Iceman fought to reach Azrael, desperately holding off Zorthal. The codex flashed, a wave of energy knocking them all back. Azrael struggled to his feet, clutching the artifact. "Brian, Iceman, take the codex, get it to the ghost." Brian shook his head. "We're not leaving you." A chunk of stone struck Azrael's shoulder, driving him to his knees. Zorthal loomed over him, psionic energy coalescing into a spear of light. "Go. The codex is all that matters now." Azrael thrust the artifact into Brian's hands, then charged at Zorthal in a final, desperate attack. Tears in his eyes, Brian turned and ran, Iceman and the others close behind. They scrambled through the collapsing vault, dodging falling stone and lashing psionic energy. Brian risked one final look back. Azrael and Zorthal were locked in combat, the Hydrus warlord's spear piercing the prince's chest, even as Azrael's blade found Zorthal's throat. Then the vault collapsed, burying them both in a tons of ancient rubble. The ghost lifted off, engines straining. Brian clutched the codex to his chest, Azrael's final words echoing in his mind. The artifact hummed with power, ancient runes pulsing with infinite promise. Whatever came next, the codex would light the way. The ghost tore through the sky, chased by plumes of ash and dust, leaving the surface of the lost colony, the graveyard of an ancient war, behind. But the battle for the galaxy's future had only just begun. The ghost burst from the collapsing vault in a shower of stone and dust. Brian gunned the engines, the ship shaking as it clawed for altitude. Behind them, the ancient structure crumbled, burying Zorthal beneath tons of rubble. In the cargo hold, Azrael clutched the celestial codex, its crystalline surface pulsing with an inner light. "We did it," he breathed, exhaustion and relief etched on his face. Brian nodded, his hands tight on the controls. "Let's just hope it was worth it." They docked with the Shadowfire, the larger ship's hull scarred from the ferocious battle above. Iridian scholars swarmed around the codex as Azrael handed it over, their eyes wide with awe and anticipation. "Unlock its secrets," Azrael commanded. "The future of our people depends on it." As the scholars set to work, Brian and his team tended to their wounds and prepared for the next fight. They knew Carla wouldn't be far behind. Hours turned into days as the scholars pored over the codex, deciphering its ancient language and complex schematics. Excitement turned to concern, then dread. "Your Highness," the lead scholar said, his voice trembling, "the codex, it shows a path to peace but also great danger." Azrael frowned. "Explain." "It speaks of a weapon, a doomsday device capable of destroying entire star systems, and it's here on this very world." Brian's blood ran cold. "Carla can't get her hands on that. We have to find it first, destroy it." Alarms blared, the Shadowfire rocking under sudden impact. "Contact!" the tactical officer yelled. "It's Carla! She's found us!" Azrael and Brian rushed to the bridge, watching in horror as a massive Hydrus fleet dropped out of warp, weapons blazing. The Shadowfire shuddered, its shields straining under the onslaught. "We have to protect the codex," Azrael said, gripping the command chair. "Prepare for ground assault. We'll lure them away from the ship." Brian nodded, already moving. "Iceman, you're with me. We'll take the fight to them." Dropships screamed through the atmosphere, Hydrus warriors leaping out in a hail of plasma fire. Brian and Azrael led the charge, their weapons spitting death, their soldiers a tide of steel and courage. Carla's elites met them head-on, the ground shaking under the fury of their clash. Brian ducked and weaved, his rifle barking, each shot a kill. Beside him, Azrael danced with his energy blades, a whirlwind of light and shadow. A shockwave rippled across the battlefield, soldiers on both sides clutching their heads in agony. A figure rose from the ruins of the vault, blood-soaked and wreathed in psionic energy. Zorthal, his eyes burning with madness and power. "You thought me defeated." His voice boomed in their minds, a spike of pain and despair. "I am reborn, a god of vengeance." He lashed out, tendrils of psychic force ripping through the ranks of soldiers, turning them into puppets dancing on his strings. Brian felt the pressure on his mind, the whispers of surrender and oblivion. Then Iceman was there, his own psychic aura flaring to life. "Not today, you bastard!" He closed his eyes, focusing his power, and the air between them shimmered and cracked. A psychic duel raged across the battlefield, reality warping and twisting around Zorthal and Iceman. Soldiers on both sides faltered, caught between the clash of titans. Above, the space battle reached a crescendo, the Shadowfire and the remnants of the human fleet fighting with desperate valor against Carla's armada. Hulls cracked, ships burned, the void lit by the fires of war. In the heart of the Shadowfire, the scholars worked frantically. unraveling the final secrets of the Codex. The lead scholar's face paled, his hands shaking. "Your Highness," he whispered over the comm, his voice heavy with dread. "The superweapon, it's not a device, it's alive." Azrael's eyes widened. "What do you mean, alive?" "The Codex calls it the Devourer, an ancient entity that consumes the energy of stars. It caused the cataclysm that divided our people." The scholar swallowed hard. "And if it awakens, if Kalar finds it, it will consume the galaxy itself." Azrael's grip tightened on his blades, his face grim. "Then we fight, scholar. We fight until our last breath." He turned to Brian, the weight of destiny heavy on his shoulders. "Captain, we must unite our forces, human and Iridian alike. Only together can we hope to stop Kalar and the Devourer." Brian nodded, the fire of determination burning in his eyes. "Agreed. We'll fight side by side, as allies, as friends." He looked out over the battlefield, where Iceman and Zorthal still grappled in a storm of psychic energy. "And we'll save our brothers, or die trying." With the shocking truth of the Devourer's awakening heavy in their hearts, Brian and Azrael huddled over the Celestial Codex, desperate for a solution. The ancient artifact pulsed with an eerie light, its secrets tantalizingly close yet frustratingly opaque. "We need to buy time, keep Kalar and her forces away from the Devourer," Brian said, his brow furrowed in concentration. Azrael nodded, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into the Codex's surface. "The nebula," he whispered, a plan forming in his mind. "We leak false information, make them believe the key to controlling the Devourer lies within an ancient Iridian space station hidden there." Brian's eyes widened, a spark of hope igniting within them. A diversion, it could work. They set their plan in motion, carefully crafting the false intelligence and ensuring its discovery by Katlar's spies. As predicted, the Hydrus fleet took the bait, the Void Reaper and its escorts veering away from the lost colony world and plunging into the swirling depths of the nebula. Brian and Azrael wasted no time. Assembling a strike team of their most skilled and trusted warriors, they boarded a stealth ship, the Ghost, and set course for the Void Reaper, determined to end Kalar's reign of terror once and for all. As the Ghost slipped silently through the void, Iceman and Zorthal's psychic duel raged on, their minds locked in a battle as fierce as any physical confrontation. Iceman could feel the hatred and pain that fueled Zorthal's every thought, the weight of centuries of oppression and injustice bearing down upon them both. In a moment of startling clarity, Iceman saw the path forward, the only way to break the cycle of violence and mistrust. He reached out with his mind, not to attack, but to connect, to bridge the gap between Iridian and Hydrus. Images and emotions flooded through the link, a torrent of shared history and common struggle. Zorthal reeled, his defenses crumbling in the face of this unexpected onslaught. He saw the truth of their people's intertwined past, the potential for a future of unity and healing. Iceman pressed forward, his mental voice a soothing balm. "It doesn't have to be this way, Zorthal. We can end this together." Zorthal's resolve wavered, the hatred in his heart giving way to a flicker of hope. He looked at Iceman, seeing not an enemy, but a brother, a fellow victim of the Devourer's machinations. On board the Void Reaper, Brian and Azrael's team fought their way through the ship's defenses, their weapons flashing in the dim light. They moved with precision and purpose, each warrior a master of their craft. As they neared the bridge, they were met by Kalar's elite guard, a phalanx of snarling Hydrus warriors armed with crackling energy blades. The battle was joined, a whirlwind of steel and plasma, as the two sides clashed in a desperate struggle for control of the ship. Brian and Azrael fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized, each covering the other's blind spots. They pushed forward, inch by bloody inch, until at last they stood before the doors to the bridge. With a final desperate effort, they breached the command center, storming into the room with weapons drawn. Kalar stood at the center of the chaos, her eyes blazing with fury and madness. "You're too late," she hissed. her claws tightening around the hilt of her sword. "The Devourer is awake, and it hungers for your destruction." Brian and Azrael exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They charged forward, their blades meeting Karlar's in a clash of sparks and shrieks of metal on metal. The battle was brutal, each combatant pushing themselves to the limit of their skill and endurance. But in the end, Brian and Azrael's teamwork proved too much for Karlar's single-minded ferocity. They subdued her, wrestling her to the ground and locking her in restraints. As they caught their breath, Karlar's words echoed in their minds, the true scope of the threat they faced becoming clear. The Devourer, the ancient enemy that had torn their peoples apart, was not just awake, but had been manipulating the war from the very beginning, feeding on the chaos and suffering it had sown. Brian and Azrael knew what they had to do. They opened a channel to the fleets, to the warriors on the ground, to every Iridian, Hydrus, and human who would listen. "This is Captain Brian Ward and Prince Azrael. The true enemy is not each other, but the Devourer, the ancient evil that seeks to consume us all. We must put aside our differences, unite as one, and face this threat together. Only then can we hope to survive, to build a future for all our peoples. Join us and let us fight as one." As the message spread, as the truth of their words sank in, ships began to break away from the battle, converging on the lost colony world. Iridian and Hydrus, human and AI, all bound by a common cause, a shared destiny. The final battle was upon them, a struggle for the very soul of the galaxy, and as Brian and Azrael watched the Allies gather, they knew that whatever the outcome, they would face it together, united at last against the darkness. In the heart of the chaos, the united fleet swarmed around the Devourer, a maelstrom of ships and weapons fire. The monstrosity pulsed with eldritch energy, tendrils whipping out to ensnare vessels and drain them dry. Hulls crumpled like tin cans, venting atmosphere and bodies into the void. Brian gripped the Ghost's controls, his face grim. "All ships, focus fire on the tendrils, keep it distracted." A chorus of acknowledgements crackled over the comms, as the fleet unleashed a barrage of missiles, lasers, and plasma. The Devourer recoiled, its tendrils retracting, but only for a moment. It surged forward, a wave of destruction, swatting ships aside like gnats. On the Shadowfire's bridge, Iceman stood amidst a circle of Iridian and Hydrus psychics, their eyes closed in concentration. Zorthal, his once manic gaze now clear and focused, placed a hand on Iceman's shoulder. "Are you ready, brother?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble. Iceman nodded, sweat beading on his brow. "Let's do this." They joined hands, their minds linking, a web of psychic energy. Iceman reached out, his consciousness brushing against the Devourer's, a contact that sent shockwaves through his being. The Devourer's mind was a maelstrom of primal hunger and ancient pain, a shattered kaleidoscope of fractured memories and twisted instincts. Iceman gritted his teeth, the psychic backlash threatening to overwhelm him. It's not evil," he gasped, his words echoing through the mind link. "It's lost, broken. It needs our help." Zorthal's presence was a steadying anchor, his psychic strength bolstering Iceman's own. "Then we shall guide it back to the light." Together they plunged into the Devourer's consciousness, a brilliant lance of psychic energy. They navigated the twisted labyrinth of its mind, seeking the core of its being, the spark of what it once was. Outside, the battle raged on, the fleet fighting with desperate ferocity. Brian and Azrael led the charge, their ships darting and weaving through the Devourer's tendrils, drawing its attention away from the psychic assault. A tendril speared the Ghost's wing, sending it spinning. Brian wrestled with the controls, alarms blaring. "Iceman, whatever you're doing, do it fast. We can't hold out much longer." In the depths of the Devourer's mind, Iceman and the psychics pushed deeper, battling through the corruption and chaos. They found the core, a flickering ember of ancient light, buried beneath eons of darkness. "There," Iceman cried, his psychic voice a beacon. "That's what we need to heal." They gathered around the ember, pouring their energy into it, fanning it to life. The light grew, a pulsing, cleansing radiance that spread through the Devourer's being, burning away the corruption, mending the fractures. The Devourer convulsed, its tendrils flailing. Ships scattered, desperately evading the wild swings. The entity's form began to shift, to change, the pulsating mass of energy coalescing into something new, something pure. In a blinding flash of light, the Devourer vanished, leaving behind a shimmering, ethereal being of breathtaking beauty. It hovered before the fleet, its presence a soothing balm, a gentle touch on the minds of all who beheld it. "Thank you," it whispered, its voice a symphony of gratitude. "You have freed me from the prison of my own madness, restored me to my true self." The being turned to face the assembled ships, its gaze encompassing all. "The cataclysm that divided your peoples was not of your making, but a consequence of my own folly. In my hunger, I sought to devour the very fabric of the universe, and in doing so, I tore asunder the bonds that united you." It bowed its head, a gesture of profound contrition. "I offer you now a chance to heal, to forge a new future together. Let the wounds of the past be mended. Let the divisions between you dissolve in the light of understanding and compassion." The Iridians and Hydrus, human and AI, looked to one another, centuries of hatred and mistrust melting away in the face of this cosmic revelation. Hands were clasped, tears were shed, and a new era of peace and unity dawned upon the galaxy. On the Shadowfire's bridge, Iceman sagged against Zorthal, his strength spent. The Hydrus warrior caught him, a smile on his weathered face. "You did it, brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all." Iceman grinned, exhaustion and triumph etched in equal measure on his features. "We did it, Zorthal, all of us together." Brian's voice crackled over the comms, jubilant and proud. "Iceman, you magnificent bastard! You just rewrote history!" Azrael's laughter joined in, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. "A new chapter begins, my friends, a chapter of hope and harmony." The ethereal being smiled, its radiance bathing the fleet in a warm, inviting glow. "Go forth, children of the stars, embrace your destiny, and know that you are never alone." With a final shimmering pulse, the being vanished, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, a universe reborn in the crucible of understanding and unity. The ships of the Allied fleet hung in space, their crews breathless with awe and wonder. A new era had dawned, a future bright with promise and possibility, and at the center of it all, a band of heroes who had risked everything to bring about this miraculous transformation. Brian, Azrael, Iceman, and Zorthal, the champions of a galaxy reborn, stood together on the Shadowfire's bridge. Their eyes locked on the stars, their hearts filled with the knowledge that, at long last, the dream of peace had become a reality. Iceman gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he pushed his psychic powers to their limit. The corrupted consciousness of the Devourer fought back, a maelstrom of chaos and primal hunger, but Iceman refused to yield, pouring every ounce of his strength into the psychic link. Beside him, Zorthal and the other psychics strained against the onslaught. Their minds joined in a desperate chorus. They delved deeper into the Devourer's fractured psyche, seeking the core of its being, the source of the corruption that had consumed it for eons. And then, in a blinding flash of clarity, they found it. A pulsing knot of twisted energy, the ancient wound that had shattered the Devourer's mind. Iceman reached out, his psychic touch gentle but unyielding. "We're here to help," he whispered, his words echoing through the mindscape. "Let us heal you." The Devourer's consciousness shuddered, a flicker of recognition sparking amidst the chaos. Iceman and the others seized upon that flicker, pouring their energy into it, coaxing it to grow. Slowly, painfully, the corruption began to recede, the Devourer's mind unfolding like a flower in the sun. Shattered fragments of memory and identity knit back together, the wounds of ages past mending beneath the psychic team's touch. Outside in the physical realm, the Devourer's form began to wither, its tendrils shriveling and fading away. The Allied fleet, seeing their chance, unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, tearing through the weakened entity's outer layers. Hulls buckled and ruptured, ichor spilling into the void as the Devourer's defenses crumbled. At the heart of the fleet, the Ghost and the Shadowfire pressed forward, their weapons blazing. "We're breaking through!" Brian shouted over the comm, his voice thick with determination. "All ships concentrate fire on the core." A salvo of quantum torpedoes and plasma beams slammed into the Devourer's exposed center, peeling away layer after layer of twisted flesh, and there, pulsing at the heart of the chaos, was the core, a seething mass of pure energy. "Azrael, are you seeing this?" Brian asked, his eyes wide. The Iridian Prince nodded, his face grim. "The source of its power, we have to destroy it." "Agreed. Prep the boarding pods, we're going in." The Ghost shuddered as the pods launched, streaking towards the Devourer's core. Brian and Azrael led the charge, their teams of elite warriors at their backs. They plunged into the writhing mass of the Devourer's innards, their weapons spitting fire. Hideous creatures born of the Devourer's twisted flesh rose up to meet them, screeching and clawing with reckless abandon. The warriors fought back, their blades and guns tearing through the abominations. Step by blood-soaked step, they pushed deeper into the Devourer's heart, the pulsing core growing larger with each passing moment. The air crackled with energy, the heat searing even through their armor. At last, they stood before the core, a seething, pulsating mass of pure destructive power. Brian and Azrael exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew what had to be done. The only way to ensure the Devourer's defeat, to sever its connection to the physical realm. With grim determination, they overrode the safeties on their suit's power cores, setting them to overload. "It's been an honor," Brian said, his voice steady even as the core began to pulse faster, the energy build-up nearing critical mass. Azrael clasped his hand, a warrior's salute, for the future. The world went white, a searing flash of heat and light and unimaginable power. The core shattered, the Devourer's form dissolving into a billion motes of fading energy. On the psychic plane, Iceman and the others felt the Devourer's consciousness dissolve, a wave of pure, unbridled energy washing over them. It flooded into their minds, a cascade of images and sensations, a glimpse of the fundamental truth of the universe. They saw the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate web of life and energy that bound the cosmos together. They felt the echoes of the Devourer's ancient pain and the joy of its final liberation. And then it was gone, the Devourer's essence dissipating into the fabric of the universe, a final sigh of release and peace. In the aftermath, the Allied fleets gathered, their ships battered and scarred but victorious. They came together to mourn the fallen, the brave souls who had given their lives to secure the future. Brian and Azrael were among them, their names etched into the annals of history, their sacrifice a shining beacon of hope and unity. Iceman, forever changed by his brush with the Devourer's consciousness, stepped forward to address the gathered races. The weight of his new understanding settled upon his shoulders, a mantle of wisdom and purpose. "Today we have won a great victory," he said, his voice ringing out across the assembled ships. "But it is only the beginning. The Devourer's legacy, the scars it leaves upon our galaxy, will take time to heal." He looked out at the sea of faces, Iridian and Hydrus, human and AI, all united in this moment of triumph and sorrow. So we must forge a new path together, a path of understanding, of cooperation. We have seen the power of unity, the strength that comes from setting aside our differences and working towards a common goal. Iceman raised the celestial codex, the ancient artifact glinting in the light of 1,000 suns. "This is our future, a future of peace, of progress, a future where the sacrifices of the fallen are honored, and their memories live on in the hearts of all who come after." As the galaxy began to rebuild, the Codex was enshrined on the lost colony world, a symbol of the hard-won peace and the price paid to achieve it. The races of the galaxy looked to the stars, to the endless expanse of the universe, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For in the end, it was not the might of their weapons or the power of their ships that had saved them. It was the strength of their unity, the unbreakable bonds of fellowship and common purpose. And that, more than anything, was the true legacy of the war against the Devourer, a legacy that would endure, a light to guide the galaxy through the ages to come. The Allied Fleet. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.